Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. And this is the Resilient Learners Backpack, movement that shifts nervous system states and increases resiliency. And I'm Dr. Debra Em Wilson, and I will be your facilitator this evening. And if you want to get a hold of me after the webinar, I'm at info@schoolmoves.com. Feel free to reach out. I love hearing from you. So those of you who didn't join my last webinar I did for Therapro, I talked about the Polyvagal Path to Joyful Learning, my book that was published last February. It's been over a year already, and it did get listed as one of the favorites for educators in 2023 from the Greater Good Science Center. And what's cool about that is that it reached the educator market, the teachers. And so I feel like I'm excited that teachers are understanding about nervous system states, because I feel like all of us on the call today, if you're an OT or a PT, sometimes we have a difficult time speaking the same language. So my hope in this book was to get language that we could all share together and enjoy. So most of the people said, okay, so we have the theory, but where are the activities? And I had actually wanted to do one book, but the publisher asked me to do two different books. So we had the theory and there were some activities in it, the first book. But then I got to really make it my own in the second book. Norton closed down their education division, so I actually got the rights back, and I've been playing with it for over a year and revising, and really excited to share today what I've come up with. It's been a lot of fun to design activities and try to figure out what could really work in classrooms and with busy support staff. So I'm hopeful this evening that you all are going to get some ideas that you go, yep, I can start using that tomorrow. I wanted to really look in book 2, the Resilient Learners Backpack. I wanted to look at resiliency, because polyvagal theory is a lot of it's a lot of trauma work and trauma work in the mental health fields. And I feel like trauma work in the classrooms, there's a lot of good programs now, and I feel like it's pretty well covered. But what I wanted to do was say, okay, how do we create more resilient learners? What do resilient learners do naturally? And can we help our students become more resilient? And what would that look like in terms of nervous system states and understanding and befriending our own nervous system states, and that leading to more resiliency? And of course, I'm with School Moves and been doing this for 25 years. I'm celebrating 25 years this year, actually, of being the founder of School Moves and having it in schools. So that's pretty exciting. But as a School Moves person, you know we're going to be talking about movement, because I'm a big proponent of movement to shift nervous system states. But what I've learned through polyvagal theory is there's subtleties around what movements we're going to choose and why. So we're going to talk about that today. The origins of resiliency is interesting to me. It really started out with like forests in nature, and how do forests become more resilient during forest fires, and how do they rebound? And Buzz Hollings was probably one of the first people to really use that word, resilience, resiliency. And then that got brought into the mental health field and early childhood development and social psychology and relational neuroscience. So the term resilience is batted around in a lot of different ways with different definitions of it. So, and what I really found interesting when I was doing this research was, are checklists reliable? And you have the five key things to be more resilient. And Dr. Bonanno is, he kind of flips this whole thing on his head, and he wrote this book called The End of Trauma. And I read the book in researching for my book too, and I just love this idea that we have a checklist, but what he said is when push comes to shove and something happens, we don't really know who's going to be resilient and who isn't. It just kind of depends. And so he calls this the resilience paradox. And you'll notice I have quiz question, because those of you who want your CEUs, you're going to have to take a quiz at the end. So I am going to, throughout the presentation, tell you this is a quiz question. So heads up, if you're feeding your dog or doing something right now, not paying attention, I'm just going to call attention to that this is a question that what is the resilience paradox? So it's basically We think certain traits will make us more resilient, but push comes to shove, doesn't really happen that way. So he has this idea of resilience trajectory, and I loved this because I felt like this could be so helpful when we're thinking of our students at school and our clients and our clinics. Is resilience trajectory is when people, in otherwise normal circumstances, are exposed to an isolated and potentially highly disruptive event, but they nonetheless maintain a stable trajectory of healthy functioning over time. Meaning something happens to them and we figure it out, and we over time get back to a healthy place in our nervous system. So I have a poll question for you. Oh, and we were also going to say who's on the call. Do you want to do that, Allison? Just check in with who's on the call today.
Sure, let's launch that one first and then we can do the next one. All right, so it looks like 81% of our audience is OT or OTA. We've got 1% saying SLP or a speech language pathology assistant. We have 10% identifying as teacher, educational professional, 7% saying other.
Maybe parents. Maybe we have some parents with us this evening. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
If we do, you guys can.
Yeah.
And let's launch our.
Yeah. So here's So 75% of us will experience a significant traumatic event in our lives. What percentage of us will receive the diagnosis of PTSD? And this is something we're looking at right now in the literature and in research, is what does post-traumatic growth look like? It's a phenomenon where adversity is transformative and leads us to becoming stronger and wiser humans. So we take, all these traumatic events that kind of add up in our lifetime, and we become smarter about it. We become wiser. We become more, sometimes compassionate, more loving as a result of these things that have happened to us. And so just jot that down. That is a quiz question. But the point I want to make too is like books like The Body Keeps the Score and some of the books that focus on trauma have to remember that those research studies and a lot of that information was done on people who had PTSD. So sometimes it skews those stats a little bit to think that, like we're gonna get sick if we had a lot of trauma when we were younger. Well, it depends on what we did with that trauma. It depends on how we handled it. And did we grow from that trauma? And did we, have people in our lives that supported us even though we had this traumatic childhood going on? So there's a lot of variables. So I just feel like we don't have to think we're all gonna be sick because we've had trauma in our lives. I grew up in a violent alcoholic home. It was really intense. But I've always figured out how to stay safe and how to still thrive at school. And I feel like what I learned in reading Dr. Bonanno's book was that that's typical, that it's more normal than we think. So I want you to think about students in our classrooms today and how do we view them? I think an important part of what we do in this work is we need to view them as resilient. We need to view them as adaptable. But in order to have this experience of post-traumatic growth, we do need an adaptable and flexible nervous system. So that's where polyvagal theory enters for me and how I've learned so much of it in my life. When you write books, I was just telling Allison, I still owe the publisher like $3,000, even though thousands of books have sold. I haven't made a dime yet because you pay for your editing, you pay for your indexing. There's all these things that you pay for that aren't part of the publication, and then you get 10%. And so I write these books. It's a labor of love because I feel like it's really important information. So this polyvagal theory, with my background in trauma, has just transformed my life. I really can look at my nervous system, my family's nervous system, and I understand it so much more. It's just been life-changing. And that's why I keep on this polyvagal path. So Dr. Stephen Porges and Deb Dana, they're the two biggies in this field, of course. Stephen Porges is the developer of polyvagal theory. And then Deb Dana is the licensed social worker, clinical social worker, and she's the one who took from the scientific and made it into practical application in the mental health world. And then she asked me to bring it from that into the education community. So that's kind of how this all worked out. So in book 2, I have a shopping list. And what I'm doing in book 2 is pretending we have this metaphorical backpack and we carry it with us wherever we go. So whatever situation we're in, we have these tools and we understand how to stay regulated if we're starting to get pulled out of dysregulation. But I didn't just use polyvagal theory in book 2. I also looked at future studies methodology, which is what I used for my doctoral dissertation. I used that methodology to interview OTs and gen ed teachers and their collaborative experiences. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, and also extended mind science. The 3 of these group of research and practical application is how I put the book together, and I think it's more powerful than any one thing by itself. So this is a little power of maybe that the brain kind of gets into that I'm using on you today. That is, if you stay till the end, you're going to get my 7 steps to resilience. And if you don't, you're not going to get to know them all. So we're going to start with step 1. And this is how I laid the book out. My brain's kind of a basket, kind of puts things in baskets, puts things in steps. It's how I organize information. So step 1 is befriend your nervous system. And book 2 parallels book 1. So if you read book 1, Chapter 1 in the book 1, the Polyvagal Path, is befriend your nervous system. So now these are the activities that you might use to help students and help yourself befriend your nervous system. So in the book, every chapter has a little bit of information, not a ton, but a little bit kind of a review. Get you up to date if you haven't read book 1, so that you can use the activities. And then I use this learning path tool to help. It's the image I'm using throughout the book. And I love this idea that we're on a path. And when we're learning and becoming a resilient learner, are we either on the path or not on the path, or do we have a tree in the middle? And what do we have to decide if there's a challenge? Are we going to cut the tree down? Are we going to jump over the tree? Are we going to go around the tree? Are we just going to stand there and let the ants crawl all over our feet and not do anything? So I like this. So I've used this metaphor with these little stick people. And my son actually drew all this for me, and I had to bribe him with some sandwiches. I had to feed him a lot of Jersey Mike's BLT sandwiches to keep him at it and keep working. But I really like how it's come out, because I feel like it's pretty generic and most people understand stick figures. And if you look at them, you can see the nervous system states here. So with the backpack on, that means you're on your path, you've got your supplies, you've got all your resiliency tools, and you're heading toward your goals. In the middle of the path, you're in sympathetic and you're in fight with hands on hips, or you're in flight, right? Backpack's kind of a mess, stuff is skewed kind of spread out everywhere, and you're mobilized, but it's disorganized, and something has to come along. You need resources. How do I organize this mobilization? And then in dorsal vagal, you can see the little guys just like, why try? Why bother? Nothing ever works. And that's the shutdown. That's that part of our nervous system that feels disconnected, feels alone, feels like we don't have energy. So that's the metaphor I'm using in the book. Oh, it says quiz. So the quiz is, I think you need to know the 3 nervous system states. I think that's one of the quiz questions. So it's ventral vagal, it's sympathetic, and dorsal vagal. So after I do a little explaining in each of the steps, then there's the backpack essentials. And so I have a 1-thing quote. I contacted all the people's books I read, and I said, there's so much of this stuff, I'm just overwhelmed. Can you say one thing that you think is the most important thing that you want people to know? And so Dr. Porges' 1-thing quote he sent to me was, listen to and honor your bodily states and be aware of the bodily states of your students. And so each section has an objective, and then it has 12 activities, and there's an activity and there's also a way to use it. So here we go, reviewing again. Now, here's the thing I want to explain. Please listen up for this, because this is a little confusing, but I've been talking with Deb Dana about it, and I'm going to get into zones in a second. Okay, so ventral vagal, when I say safe, connected, eager, curious, that's kind of where we are in our nervous system. We're not activated. It's not perfect in bliss, but we're able to solve the challenges that come along. And here's the cool thing. You can be angry in ventral vagal. You can be mad at someone in ventral vagal. As long as you stay regulated and you say, you know what, I'm getting kind of ticked off here, right? And I'm starting to feel myself move into sympathetic. I'm starting to feel myself get angry. So that's a real high interoceptive, where you're checking in and you're knowing that you're starting to move out of a ventral vagal state. So it doesn't, these are the flavors, Deb Dana calls it the flavors of the nervous system states, but it's not like, oh, these are all the feelings related with this. You wouldn't teach it to a student that way, because we can be in a lot of different feelings and a lot of different emotions. We can be very sad in ventral, but sad so that we say, oh gosh, that new information's really made me sad. So what do I do now? Well, I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go talk to a friend, or, you know, so I know I'm going to do something to help me keep one foot in ventral, to get that, to not get activated from it. I hope that makes sense. And so in sympathetic, we're more threatened, frustrated, angry, inflexible, mobilized, anxious, worried, uncertain. And then in dorsal vagal, the flavor of it is sad and alone. And I put quiet quitting in there because I think that might be, like teachers and other people who say they're quiet quitting, that might be part of dorsal vagal. And that's where you just don't have the energy. You don't want to, you know, you want to pull the covers over your head. So there's a challenge with when I'm doing my trainings. When we get to zones, the schools that have adopted zones, there's a little bit of, I don't know how this is going to work, because we're teaching children and young adults in the classrooms to look at their zones. There's not a conflict. And I just this evening, for your benefit, uploaded at my YouTube channel. Just Google School Moves with the apostrophe S apostrophe COOLMOVES, and my YouTube channel comes up. I have a lot of really great videos that where I'm explaining all these different concepts. And I've done some videos with Deb Dana. I've done some with Leanna Ray, who's a social worker. So I just did one on zones, because is it either or? Like, if we do zones, is that going to be too complicated and confusing for a student to also be able to tell their nervous system states? And I actually asked Deb Dana to meet with me and talk to me, and she's a very busy woman. And she met with me, and we had a nice conversation about this. And I said, you know, I'm trying to understand where polyvagal fits with a zones approach, because you also have another book where they have a yellow path, a red path, and a green path, like a behavior. The book Beyond Behaviors uses colored paths. So where does this fit? If you're in a blue zone, it's really important. The foundation of who we are is knowing our nervous system state. That's how we understand our feelings. Like, you can have these feelings, but if you don't know, am I activated by these feelings? Am I not activated by these feelings? Do these feelings send me down my path into dorsal vagal, or send me into sympathetic? That's huge. And maybe we start by the adults observing nervous system states and the students, instead of asking students to discover their nervous system states. Maybe that's where we start. Anyway, I have a really lovely video that I just created that have 8 things that I've learned with polyvagal theory, 8 concepts that I think fit beautifully with zones work. And it's not an either or, it's so complementary. It deepens your understanding of these zones. It deepens it. Because you can be worried in a yellow zone, but you could still be in ventral, but you might not be. You could be worried and anxious and really be activated and be in a fight or flight. So I think it's important to understand these nervous system states and how they are showing themselves along with these feelings. I hope that makes some sense to everyone. So this is one of the activities in the book where you name your nervous system states, whatever you want to name them. So this is a quiz question. I named the nervous system states over on the far right with the people version. I named Curious Explorer, because that's where we are in Ventral. We're curious. We're looking around. We're like, oh, you know, life is good. What do I want to learn today? The Restless Rambler, just not real directed, not sure where they're heading. They don't have a course planned out. They don't have a game plan. Or the Dorsal Dweller. And that's, you know, I'm just staying put. I'm staying in my little cave. I'm staying under my desk. I don't want to come out. And you'll see that I also have an animal example. So don't worry, for those of you who are working with TK and to like about 3rd grade, I asked a bunch of preschool people, what animal do most kids like and feel good about? And the unanimous was the rabbit, even though rabbits can be very anxious and can get scared and can have heart attacks by being too afraid, but generally they liked the rabbit. So I have Ready Rabbit, I have Restless Raccoon, and I have Turtle. And so I have made a point to go find puppets that I so love. I love puppets, so that I can share with children. So this is the rabbit, and this is my raccoon here. And then I know I'm kind of small, but hopefully.
I don't think we have your video on.
Oh, so they can't see me at all?
No, so if you want to just turn your webcam on, then we can see you. So in your control.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so just go to your
okay.
Yeah, just go to your control panel. Under the webcam, click share my webcam.
Oh, I thought I had done that already. Okay. So nobody's been able to see me this whole time?
No.
That's funny. Well, hello, everyone. I am here. Okay. So I was talking about you can name these states and personalize them. So I do have these little puppets. I have the raccoon, and I also came up with, I found some finger puppets. So these are just quite lovely. And so this is the finger puppet for the rabbit. And then I have one for the raccoon. And then I have one for the turtle. And he actually brings it, you can actually bring his head right in. So I have Tender Turtle, I have Restless Raccoon, and I have Ready Rabbit. So in the book, there's a section, first I have everybody understand the people version, the stick people version of everything, and then I have modifications using the animals and a supplement with the animals. So that's there available for you. So the quiz, then you got it. It's Curious Explorer, Restless Rambler, and Dorsal Dweller. You can also do weathers, you know, sunny, stormy, foggy. You can do pretty much anything you like with this. So this is the animal version. So the rabbit's ready, the raccoons are in the middle, and then you've got your turtle. You can do anything you want. This is just what I came up with. This is what, you know, I'm using. And then I use simpler terms for the young children, you know, what it looks like. If Ready Rabbit, you feel safe. I know I can learn. I'm interested in learning new things. The Restless Raccoon is not ready to learn yet. They feel like they can't pay attention. They feel stressed or mad about learning. They need to move their bodies to learn, to get ready. And the Tender Turtle, they feel tired or sad. They don't think they can learn very well. And if they try, they're afraid they might get it wrong. So I have the main foundation book, the Resilient Learner's Backpack, and then I have, because I wanted these things in color, but it's too expensive to print the whole color book. So there's a supplement that I have that has all kinds of really fun animal. I have, if you're happy and you know what, hop like this. So I've done a whole, you know, I've done a reader's theater with the rabbit and the raccoon and the turtle. I just, it's all I do is create activities. I love it. So here's the little puppets that I found that I think can really work for helping students to understand where they are. And I've sent these out to my OT friends, and I'm getting great feedback. They said, you know, if they're doing their core work, they'll sit the little animal on their belly, and, you know, and they kind of befriend the animals, and they have a really nice time learning their nervous system states. So those of you on this call, you probably know I have a daughter, Shalia. She turns 28 in May. It's hard to believe, but she is the reason I do all of this. And this is her going into her own apartment. She actually said to me she's been in the apartment for a year now, with attendant care, with a habilitation coach, with a roommate. And she really, when I started using these animals with her text to me, as you know, she's non-speaking. Her text to me started changing into I'm mad or I'm sad. Like I could see her starting to understand her emotions, and they mean so much to her. They go back and forth. I said, Shalia, I'll give you your own set for the big house, which is the house I'm talking from right now, from Tucson, Arizona. And then she has a set at her apartment, and she's named them. And she has the rabbit's Hoppity, the raccoon's Magic, and the turtle is hilarious, is Speedy. And she really has understood. I think it's just made great leaps and bounds. And the reason why we were able to get her into her own apartment was polyvagal, looking at safety and connection. So that leads us to number 2, is the second part we're going to pack our backpacks with, is we're going to increase signals of safety and connection. So the whole time Shalia was moving out, I was watching her nervous system state. I was making sure she had lots of cues of safety. She has a webcam in her room she can turn on. I can see her. She can talk. She can't talk to me, but she can signal through it if she's needing something. So we have all these cues set up for her. So some activity. I'm going to get into movement. Don't worry. Hang on this call. I know you're like, get into the movement. I will get there just a second. I just want to lay this foundation because it's really important. So the IOB formula for safety, I talked about in the last webinar I did for Therapro. It's inside, outside, and between. So inside is, you know, that interoceptive awareness. How am I feeling? Being able to look inside and see how I am feeling inside. How are these things landing? Outside is our environment. So this is a picture of my writing room. I love it so much. Whenever I go in there, it's me. I painted my shelves these beautiful lemongrass green, and it's just, you know, I feel really regulated and ready to work and write in this room. And then outside, between others, between ourselves and others. And that your sense of safety from the inside has to match outside. Meaning if you don't feel safe in the inside, no matter how safe your environment seems or appears on the outside, you won't feel safe on the outside either. There's also the 3 C's of safety. And over at my YouTube channel, I keep saying this because I've got videos on all this if you want to learn more. This is a short little webinar, so I don't have time to go into all of this in depth. But whether you're using zones and whatever you're doing with students, you always want to keep in mind those 3 C's of safety, which are choice, context, and connection. Choice is, you know, what it says, making sure that the students have some choice in what they're doing. Context, why am I doing this? Why am I learning this? Why am I strengthening my core postural stability? What does that mean? Why is it important? And then connection, do I feel connected to you as the teacher, as the OT? Do I feel like you care about me? Is there that connection set up between us? So those are how the nervous system receives how safe somebody's feeling. So those are the 3 C's of safety. Those are from Deb Dana. Also, there's a cognitive mind-body loop, right? It's not just my nervous system feels safe, but our stories that we create determine how safe we're going to feel. And so this is where I get into futures studies. Futures is where it's not about predicting the future, it's what do we do today to create the future we want tomorrow. And so many of the students I've worked with, you know, I don't know if you all know, but I've worked with high school students for years, and I'm a reading specialist. And these high school students were demoralized, they quit, they didn't quietly quit, they loudly quit. They had a lot of behavior issues. I had to restory. What does that mean? That's a term we use in the mental health field that I'm bringing into our field. Restoring is saying, okay, what is my story? And then unpacking it. Who or limits me in this story? So if my story is, I'm just terrible at reading. Well, who's limiting you in this, and who's supporting you in this? My parents say I'm a bad reader, my whatever, and then what are your assumptions, beliefs? I'll never learn to read. I haven't. I'm in 11th grade and I haven't learned to read yet. Those are the students I worked with for years. I was a high school biology teacher. I turned reading specialist because half the kids couldn't read my book, the biology book. So I really wanted to help those students. But I had to unpack their assumptions and their beliefs that they couldn't read. Most of them had some form of dyslexia along with sensory processing. Almost all of them had sensory processing issues that were just never diagnosed. And then lastly, like, what's your myth and your story? And what is your nervous system state associated with this story, right? So it's this mind-body loop that we really want to look at both of them. We can't, we feel safest in our body when we have good midline skills, postural stability, and vision, and sensory processing, and vestibular. All that. That's the foundation. And then we look at, well, how are these things impacting? And what are our stories around our ability to focus, our ability to regulate? Do we believe we even can? And I know this is high level for some of your kids, but I tried to write the book so that, because I'm doing a big high school workshop next month. So I tried to make it so that we could modify, and we could also, I think the high school students, this would be so impactful for them to understand their nervous system states. And so one of the activities in the book is to write your preferred future, draw, doodle it. What is it you want? And your used future is the future, like, I grew up with alcoholic and drug addicted parents. So is that my future? No, my future is I'm going to get good an education. I'm going to stay in school. And so that's the used future, the one that doesn't serve us anymore. So what is the future you want moving forward, and what action step can you take? So now we get into movement, but I wanted to just set that foundation that it is mind-body loop. We cannot ignore our stories, what we tell ourselves, because it does affect our nervous system states. All right, so step 3, identifying regulating resources. And I mean explicitly identifying them so that there's no doubt, the students have no doubt what those resources are for them. So one of the activities that I would like to share with you is the Listen, Link, Move, Sync activity. And those of you, I know I can calm myself. It's everywhere. It's in, it's up in so many schools. What's the shift here? The shift is that I want students to actually name link. So they're going to listen, this is a real common, the heart to home, where you put your hand on your heart and the other hand on your stomach. Now you can still see me, right, Allison?
Yep, we can still see you just fine.
So it's heart to home, you listen and then you link. Where am I right now? Am I in sympathetic fight or flight? Am I in dorsal? And then what do I need? What can I do to shift? And so real common activities are the dots. I'm feeling like everybody on this call probably knows this, but maybe you don't. You just press 10 times into your hand all the way around, and you make your 10th one be right here. And you take a breath, or you shrug. Shrugging, sighing is for some people, they can't do deep breaths very well. So then you do the other hand 10 times. And then you squeeze up your arms, you squeeze up the other arms, and then you do the hug and taps. Or you can do one, you can do both, you can do all 3. It just depends. You can plug in whatever moves you love, whatever moves your students love to do. You can plug into that move place. And then put your hands together and go sync. My mind and body's working together. I'm back on my path. I'm back on my learning path. It's just really quick. It doesn't take any time at all. I have a people version and I have an animal version of it as well. So one thing really important that I want us to start thinking about is we often ask students, what happened? They come in for recess, tell me what happened. Instead, we're going to change that a little bit. And this I got from Deb Dana. Deb Dana has worked with people who have had the most traumatic lives you can imagine. She has worked with really intense trauma issues. And so I listen like, well, what are you using? What are you doing? And one of the big things she says is, let's put your story aside for right now, and let's figure out your nervous system state, because your story will change depending on your state. So this is one of the pages in the book where from ventral, we feel safe, we feel connected, we feel supported. From sympathetic, we're unsupported. People aren't our friends. The world's against us. You're feeling threatened. And from dorsal, you just feel invisible, feel not seen, lonely, sad. And so if you tell the story from dorsal, it's going to be a very different story than if you tell it from ventral. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. I had this book edited professionally, and I paid really good money for it. And then when I was working on this presentation, I copied some text from my manuscript, and I noticed a typo. Phenomenon was spelled wrong. So I went back to my manuscript and started finding typos. And here I had corrected a lot of them already, and I thought the editor had done a fantastic job. Well, I found out my design program had spell check, and I went through and I found 14 more typos. And I was just kind of shocked by it, actually, because I've read it so many times, but after a while, your eyes don't see it. Well, I uploaded it to Amazon, and you can't make any changes. So initially, my book for 3 days, for about 72 hours, may be out there like this with typos. And my nervous system state, first I was really mad. I went sympathetic. And then I just went into dorsal. I was so tired. I've been working so long on this book for a year. I felt like it's finally published, just finally. And everything just went upside down for me. So but the key is, you're in dorsal, but do you stay there for days and days and days? No, right? I'm here speaking to you. I'm back into ventral, and I'm realizing it's not the end of the world. Life will go on. Worse things can happen. But my story changes. If I tell you that story from dorsal, I'm sad, I'm upset, I just give up, I quit. But if I tell you it from ventral, I go, well, next time I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. Next time, that's not going to happen, right? So a growth path, I'm going to learn. A post-traumatic, it's a traumatic event that I'm going to learn from. Okay. So here's another thing that I'm giving you. This is in your handouts, bookmarks. So you can simply run these off and start thinking about, with some of the students you're working with, can I teach them this listen, link, move, and sync? Now, a very funny thing happened. Shalee and I were laminating, and we were creating these different activities for today. And of course, she loves the animal version. And the original version just yesterday did not have the rabbit on it, because I was thinking we're using it when we're dysregulated. She got so sad, and I knew immediately. I said, Shalia, we're missing the rabbit, aren't we? And she gives me a thumbs up. And I said, I need to put the rabbit on this bookmark, don't I? And she's like, yeah, she does not want the rabbit to be left out. And so I did change it last minute. I sent the handouts over to Allison and said, this is a change we need to make. So as I'm going through this and trying them out in my own life with my daughter, I learn as I go. So she wanted the rabbit on there. So you could say, where are you right now? And if they're in ventral, they're ready rabbit. Maybe they don't need to do any particular movement to sync. They're already in sync, but they could be in raccoon. They could be in tender turtle. So just a thought, if you want to try out the bookmarks, you can. Okay, so, and remember, each chapter has way more activities, but I don't even know time. I'm just going through this quickly as I can and just giving you some examples. So, okay, so step 4 is retune the nervous system. And here we're going to talk about, how do we take a nervous system that has had trauma or it has an over-responsive nervous system, and how do we help that nervous system find regulation and what they call in the polyvagal world retuning? So one of the really important things that I learned in writing book 1 was about this danger map. And then I came up with the idea of, well, if we have a danger map, could we have some safety rest stops? So this is one of, in the book, I have tools that are for the adults and I have activities that are for the students. So this is a tool where you might look at one of your students and start seeing the danger maps. Where is it in their day? And in chapter 2, I have a lot of activities with observing the nervous system states of your students and figuring out where their signals of danger are coming from. This one would be danger, like, is it the intruder drill that sends your student off? Is it moving from one classroom to another? You know, what are these danger maps that feel very unsafe for your students and your clients? And then what safety rest stops can we do to increase those feelings of safety? As an example, Jess, my trainer in New Jersey, she and she's doing all my on-sites now. She's so good. She's young and has a ton of energy. And so she had a student that wouldn't leave the classroom to go to her little therapy room. So they ended up giving him a picture of the therapy room, and he could look at it and hold it, and when he was ready, he would walk down, and the same thing when he'd come back, and that really helped. So that was a safety rest stop, was that picture, where he could rest for a moment, check in with his nervous system, kind of get himself in ventral, and then walk to class and feel safe doing it. And then another thing that for another retuning that I love in Deb Dana's work is glimmers, and noticing when these little moments, a kind gesture, a compliment, a rainbow, a bird, you know, when we get into dorsal, we get into sympathetic. One way we stay in ventral, or we try to head back toward ventral, is to find those glimmers. And it was so stressful the last couple weeks working on the book. I've put in probably 70 to 80 hour weeks, and I logged onto my laptop, and my graphic designer, she had started a glimmer page. We have this Trello we use. It's a program we use to keep track of all our activities that we're doing in our projects. And she had typed a little glimmer in there and taken a picture of some wildflowers that were coming up in her yard. And I thought, what a great idea for us to start noticing the glimmers before we get into the work. So maybe if you have a colleague at work, or you can start doing this among your staff, just, you know, you can notice them, you can receive them, you can sprinkle glimmers, you can share them. And so in the book, I have glimmer notes so that we can teach our students how to start noticing those glimmers, because life, let's face it, can be a little dysregulating and kind of a little depressing sometimes. So we have to say, well, what's a glimmer? What's something that we can do? We all know the triggers. You know, everyone knows the triggers, but what are those glimmers? So another activity I have is my moves activity. And this is what the shifting part I want to talk to you about. So if you're in different states, different moves will appeal to you more than others. So if you're in ventral, you know, any kind of movement will probably feel okay to your nervous system to do. So here's some examples of some of the activities that I've included in the book: rhythm moves, arrow moves. And then, but if you're in sympathetic, you want organizing. You want activities that help organize your disorganized mobilization. So that might be the listen, link, move, sync activity I just showed you. And I also have something called go and slow activity, where you move and then you have some pauses, which I'll teach you that in a little bit. And then there's, if you're in dorsal, you're so in sympathetic, you're not necessarily looking for lots of more energy moves. You're looking to organize. And in dorsal, you're looking to energize. You don't have any energy in the system. So you're looking like, what could I do? And it's not big movement at first. It's going to be a small movement that kind of matches what you're feeling. And most likely you're going to do it in co-regulating. Most likely in dorsal, you need another person to come with you, to sit with you, to be with you. So when that happened to me with the editing and my upload of my manuscript, and I can't change it for 5 days, in dorsal, my husband came in and sat with me on my bed, and actually on the bed, and said, just sat beside me and said, I know how hard you've worked to make this happen, and I'm really sorry this happened to you. And it helped regulate, right? I can borrow. Another polyvagal concept is borrowing someone else's regulated nervous system. I love that concept. Like, I'm not regulated right now, but I can borrow yours. You are. Will you loan me your regulation? There's plenty of it to go around. So I really like that concept. All right, we're moving into step 5. And I'm just trying to figure out time because you guys are 3 hours behind me. So it's 10 to 5, so it's 6, 7, 8. We go to 8:30, right?
Yes,
Right.
you got about 40 minutes or so left. Yeah.
Oh, we're good. Okay, we're good. Okay, so in step 5, we're expanding our nervous system flexibility. That is, how do we create a nervous system where we're able to, have you ever met somebody who has no flexibility of thought? I have somebody right now who works with my daughter, and it's interesting because when you work with somebody like my daughter, you have to be really flexible, and she's really likes to plan and know what's coming next, and I appreciate that and I respect that. Sometimes it makes it hard because there's days Leah won't get out of bed when she's supposed to, or there's days that, I don't know, you have upsets, right? So I want to talk a little bit about the ventral vagal brake and not ventral, the vagal brake. And this is a quiz question. So yeah, the ventral vagal brake, what is it? A, it's necessary for reducing the heart rate after a sympathetic response. So it comes in and says, hey, 120 is too fast. I got to get you back to 72, 74. And without it, you would just keep in that sympathetic fast heart rate space. B, it's key to transitioning from upbeat activities to calmer activities. So when you have students who you say, oh, they just can't transition, I hear this all the time, they have a hard time transitioning. Usually that's a bit of a vagal brake retuning issue, or a little faulty vagal brake, in that they can't slow back down once they've sped up. And C, the vagal brake can be retuned to function better. So the answer is D, all of the above. When you see this quiz question, what's your answer? D, all of the above. And I have a bike here because you can explain it in a way that if you're going downhill, you can kind of put the brakes on, right? If you start to go too fast, you can put the brakes on. If you're climbing up the hill, you can kick it in a little bit more. So that's kind of what the vagal brake does. And we can have activities that actually help with vagal brake. If you think of red light, green light, we've been playing that activity with little kids forever. That is a perfect vagal brake retuning activity, because you go, green light, go, red light, stop. And some of your students and clients who can't do that. Like once they go, there's no stopping them until they hit the wall, then the wall might stop them, or they run into your gym ball or something. So we can work on this. One of the tools I have in the book is that I want us to start looking at blended states. So we have our 3 main states, but then the vagal brake makes it possible for us to have blended states. So the ventral vagal with sympathetic is play. Means we've got the calming, the grounding energy of ventral, but we also have a little active energy of sympathetic, right? But it's organized, it's mobilized and organized, and that's play. So on the playground, when you see kids playing together lovely, then all of a sudden they start fighting, it's when the ventral has gone offline and they're all sympathetic. So can the learner play? That's one of the observations I want us to start looking at when we're observing students. And then the other state is quietly still. So that's when we're mindful, when we're sitting reading our book quietly, when we're doing our work quietly, and that is a mix, a blend of ventral with dorsal. But you don't shut down, but you have the quieting, the introspective energy of dorsal, but you don't shut down. And I want you to know that children who have a lot of trauma, quietly still is going to be hard for them, because if they're used to hiding and collapsing and being still because of fear, then being still for them could feel unsafe. So be really aware of that. In inflexible nervous systems, what we have is quietly failing. So ventral vagal and dorsal vagal blend, but the student shuts down. And I call this a quietly failing state, meaning they're not loudly failing, they've just gone offline and they don't care. They're not trying anymore because they've kind of given up. And then a freeze response. Now you can have a full-on freeze, dorsal vagal shutdown, where it's been so unsafe, you're in a situation that's so unsafe, the body doesn't want you to remember it. So you just shut down, and then whatever happens, happens, and then you come out of it later, and sometimes you don't even remember what happened. You know you have the trauma, you know something bad happened, but you can't remember the details, and the body does that on purpose to keep you safe. But in a classroom, we have kind of functional freeze. You know, we have this freeze response where a lot of these children will be seen as defiant, as stubborn, willful. This is my daughter. This is her response when she is overwhelmed with too much sensory information, too much verbal information, too much moving from one place to another, and she hasn't processed it. She freezes and she's like in cement, and you can't really get her to shift. And we have a code, and this is how this has been so impactful in my life, parenting my daughter. It's been so helpful. Is we have a code now, and I say, Shalia, I literally say, are you frozen? And she'll either go yes or no, and she usually does yes. And that's my cue. We've already figured out what regulating resources she needs. When she's frozen, she wants a hug from me. She wants me to come in and hold her, and then she usually cries. She's overwhelmed, right? So she needs that. That's what she needs to start working toward ventral and getting regulated again. So start watching your students and say, do they freeze? Is there a freeze response that's going on? And start recording it and be curious about it. So in your hand, I something in me, Allison, is telling me to stop and ask and listen for questions. I don't know why, but I feel like there's some people out there that are chomping at the bit to ask me something. Do you want to let's just take, I've been talking a long time, let's take a little break. And does anybody have a question they want to ask me so far in what I've covered? Because I've covered a lot and I've covered it quickly, but I'll just take a little break. And Allison, can you see if there's any questions?
Yep, I don't have any yet, but let's see. We'll leave the questions box open for a minute, see if anybody has any questions they want to pop in there.
Okay, I'll keep talking while the question box is open, and go ahead and put any questions you might have. So in your handout, you have a quick and quiet activity. Ugh, I love this activity. I just think it's so much fun, and I've been doing it at my trainings, and it's been really well received. So, and you can see here that the rabbit now has a carrot. In the other one, this is like a little, did you notice the difference? On the path, the rabbit has a book. She's a bookish rabbit, but here it's a carrot. Like, she's very happy and she has her carrot. So if you want to stand and do this, you can. If you've been listening and you feel like you're tired, it's the end of your long day, feel free to stand up and do it with me. I'm not going to stand because I lose track of where I am and you can't, anyway, or reorient the camera, but hop 3 times. So you'll hop 3 times, 1, 2, 3. So they're learning, this is ventral, right? And then run in place. So I'm a little bit scared, I'm a little bit frightened, maybe I'm gonna run. And you count to 10. Notice I have numbers and I have words because I want students to start learning how to count to 3 if they're at a place where they need to learn their numbers. 1, 2, 3. And then they run in place and they count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is where the vagal break comes in. This is the pause, the ventral pause. They get very small, shh, and they take 2 breaths, and they're a turtle. So they come down, onto the ground, and then they stand up. And this was funny. This little boxing raccoon, he's really what I wanted for sympathetic. But I ran it by some teacher friends of mine, and they said, oh no, the boys are going to start boxing and hitting each other. And I said, yep, I can totally see that. So I didn't use the boxing gloves, but I found a place to use the boxing raccoon. And in this one, what you're going to do is you're just going to box like this, and you're going to cross your leg, one leg over the other as you box. So it's just sort of like a little move like this. So it's not like beating you up boxing, but just kind of like this, back and forth 5 times. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then now you're mad, sympathetic mad. Stomp right foot and then left foot 4 times. So you're going to go right, left, right, left, right, left. And then run in place again for 10. Get real small. Hop, box. You see how it goes. So that's one way that you can help with the vagal break, by doing quick and quiet activities. And then for the older students, I have, this is just part of the activity. I didn't know how much time I was going to have, so I didn't know if I had time to do the whole thing. So I just put part of it in your hand. So the whole one's, the complete version's in your handouts. So retuning with the ventral pause. So what you're going to do with your hands, and you have no tools, which I love, they don't need anything. You're just pressing into the desk. So you're literally pressing with both hands, and then you're going to press left and you're going to press right. You all know this. You know deep pressure. You know how good it is for joints and proprioceptive feedback and all that good stuff. So we're just going to do it at the desk, but then you're going to pause for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. And then you're going to, you can do it either way. You can just stomp your feet, or you can press them into the floor, whatever you feel like you want to do. And then stomp or press left, stomp or press right, pause, and then we're going to do a little clap and pause. So that's an activity of getting them to move, pause, move, pause. So many students I've worked with really don't like pausing, and so they're either all go or they're all stopped. So we want them to be able to do go and slow, a little bit in between, and that's tuning that vagal break, helping them with transitions. All right, so we've befriended our nervous system, we've increased signals of safety and connection, we've identified our regulating resources, what's in our backpack that helps us stay regulated, we've worked on some retuning of the nervous system, we're expanding nervous system flexibility. Now we're going to reduce cognitive load. And this is something I really like the OTs to start using some of the extended mind science, because I think in IEP meetings and with teachers, I think it would make so much sense. And you already do these things, but I don't know that we know the vocabulary. So this is what I'm presenting in this little segment is from the Extended Mind. It's a book I adore, this book. It's all words. I mean, it's tons of research. There's no pictures. It's heavy. But it's really good, and got voted one of the best books of 2022, I think. And I have an interview with Annie Murphy-Paul at my YouTube video too, if you'd like to learn more from her. She's really interesting. The interview is really good. So there are 3 types of cognition. This is a quiz question. There's embodied cognition, situated cognition, and distributed cognition. Embodied cognition is where we learn through movement. We monitor our states within our body. So interoception, she has, her first chapter talks about interoception, and she hadn't heard of Kelly Mahler, so that was interesting. And I said, well, you know, we're teaching that in school. She said, oh, really? And I said, yeah. And so I kind of introduced her to that work. So gesturing while speaking, huge. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And tapping into that inherent wisdom found in our bodies. And then situated cognition is using resources from the outside in the environment, manipulatives, hands-on, notes, whiteboards, visuals, variable seating. So in the book, I have, and in the colored supplement, I have things like this, where you actually take the cards out and the students can, you know, use these cards to say, where am I right now on my path? And also there's, you know, some people like to make stuff, some people don't, but for the crafty folks, I have this other activity where they actually have the nervous system states here, the rabbit, the raccoon, the turtle, and you just take it off and you put it where they are on the path. So your raccoons go here and your turtle goes here. And this is an example of situated cognition. We're taking what's inside our head, like, oh, let me think about my nervous system states, and you're putting it somewhere where they can actually manipulate it and understand it and play with their nervous system states out in the environment. Really important for reducing cognitive load. It's hard to be flexible when there's so much going on in your brain. Your brain isn't, people think of it as a muscle, and they think of it as you got to work it harder, you got to work it out, but it's really all fallacy. And that's what Annie Murphy Paul talks about. Our brains work hard all day long. They need to be able to get support from the body and from the environment to actually work at its best. And same thing with the bookmarks. That's a situated cognition, right? We're taking it, we're moving it out into the environment. Distributed cognition is where we're going to take something we're learning and we're going to split it up with everybody. And you do this part, you do this part, you do this, and we'll come together, or we work together on it. So it's extending that learning in cooperative groups, collaborative groups. And that's called distributed cognition. I just feel like there's a place in what we do when we start looking at how to support students who are struggling with learning. We need to say, what can we offer them in terms of embodied cognition? What can we offer them in terms of situated and distributed? How can we help them with their learning so it's not all in their brains? So an example of embodied cognition, this is in your handouts, there's a blank one in your handouts, is we take words that they're learning, vocabulary words, spelling words, these can be emotion words, whatever they're learning, and we put them in a box, and they stand in a quadrant, painter's tape, quadrant on the floor. Those of you familiar with school moves, you know all about quadrant jumps and how to do them. And they just jump and they say the words: station, action, vacation, relation, fraction. That is embodied cognition, using the body to learn. And this will be so much more helpful than doing just flashcards and just studying with flashcards. Because when we move our bodies, we give it another way it's another path to learn. It's another way to learn something, to get that learning to stick. So many students, it doesn't stick, right? You teach them one day and the next day they've missed it again. A simple version of this is you just have letters, just simply letters, and they're jumping and they're saying their letters. I would add to this as a reading specialist. I'd probably put a picture on the side of something that starts with an M, and I'd put a picture with something that starts with an S. I'd add visuals wherever I could. So gesturing, somebody wrote a whole book about it now. I can't imagine writing a whole book about gesturing, but it's big, and I want to bring this out and make you aware of it. That what the studies have shown is that when we gesture and we talk with our hands and we show with our hands, the brain goes, it's listening, it's paying attention, it's on alert, it's watching, it's learning through that movement. Start looking at your students and see who gestures and who doesn't gesture, and you might be surprised. Shalia is non-speaking. She can speak, but it's become too hard for her, so she's quit. She doesn't gesture at all, not at all. When I took her to sign language, because I thought, we're gonna have to do sign language because she quit speaking at 12, she just said, her last sentence to me was, it's just easier to talk. So she didn't want to do sign language. So fortunately, she loves texting, so that's working out well. So I have in the Learner's Backpack book an idea, and for some of your students who do sign, of teaching sign language for the non-speaking students, ventral, and then sympathetic and shutdown, just as an idea of using some gesturing. So Allison, I'll come back to you. Do we have any questions yet?
We do. All right, so let's see. How do you help a child calm down in the midst of flight, angry, running, hitting, initially amidst frustration, trying to listen to instruction from adult, not to run, but then loses it and gets to running, hitting, yelling, throwing?
Okay, so remember to go back to cues of safety and danger, because the nervous system through neuroception is always monitoring. Now, some behavior is just behavior that's just, it's the student feels safe, there's no issues with it. But I would start with is there a cue in the environment that that nervous system is picking up on, that that student is not feeling safe in whatever that activity is? My guess is there is some cue to it. There is some signal of danger going on. And if so, it's not enough to just ameliorate those danger signals. You have to increase feelings of safety. And I feel like for those students, I would really love to see us start, before we can fix that behavior, before we can change that, not fix it, but, you know, help them regulate, they have to be able to know where they are. What is their nervous system state? I think that's a huge part. And I think that's what using the little animals with them, and like, so that they know, oh, I'm in sympathetic, and what does that mean? And then it's explicit, but you don't do it when they're in the meltdown, right? You do it when they're, like Kelly Mahler says, a meltdown's no place for intervention. Like, you don't do it in the middle of a meltdown, but you do it proactively, right? And you say, when I notice when you're in this situation, here's what's happening. And then you really, I don't know if this particular student's verbal or nonverbal, but looking at how can we increase those signals of safety, and how can we pack that backpack so that they have those resources, so that when they start going into sympathetic and they start going into that whole, you know, meltdown. Now, I am not the behavior specialist. Remember, I'm a reading specialist. So my whole take on all of this is always through learning. Like, is a student able to learn? So my guess would be, as a teacher and in learning mode, I would be looking at how I'm teaching that student and how I'm asking them to be involved, because obviously how I'm teaching or asking them to evolve isn't aligning with their nervous system. There's something that isn't going really well for that. So I would be looking at, does that student need co-regulation? Do they need somebody to be with them? Are they needing more heavy work? Or I mean, I would just, it's like a detective hat. Every student's going to be different. Every client's going to be different. But you have to just, our role is to stay in ventral and keep our explorer hat on, right? Our curious explorer, like, what is this about? And what can happen. And since Shalia's learned with her puppets, her texts are so incredibly interesting. Now she'll say, I'm mad about blah, 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 or I'm sad. Or I could say, Shalia, right now, which are you? Are you the rabbit, turtle, or raccoon? And she easily will point, you know, to the raccoon, or she can do a sign. She doesn't like the sign, but you know, if those are handy, she can very quickly tell me. Very interesting where she is. And then I know if she's mad, it's very different what she needs than if she's sad. If she's sad, it's a hug, or it's me sitting with her saying, I understand, I know this is hard. Like her phone, you know, she wants to have all her apps on it, and her phone crashes all the time because she just downloads. So I had to do parent controls. Oh boy, very mad at me. So, you know, understanding that, I hope that helps. But I am not a behavior specialist. I'm mostly, I look at behavior, of course, but I'm really looking at, can they access their curriculum? Can they do what I'm asking them? And if not, I look at how can I teach differently, and how can I provide an environment using embodied cognition and distributed cognition and situated cognition that helps the student, that engages. I've worked with the most uncooperative students in my literacy room. I taught K-6 literacy for 8 years, and at a really difficult school district. And you know, I just found the thing. I found the thing that engaged them. I found the thing they loved, and they would come in and I'd have them, you know, one kid, it was a marble 8 board that he could move the marble around. He loved that. So coming in, that was his getting ready to learn. His ventral thing was playing with that marble 8 board. So I know it's tricky, and it's you have to look at, you know, the whole home environment. There's just so much going on. So I don't claim to be able to solve that question quickly. That makes sense.
The other question that came in quick and quiet activity, do you have the child go through all the rows from start to finish, or do you stop when you feel the child is getting regulated?
I would have them go through it all, because they're learning about their states, and I think it's a wonderful way for them to embody cognition, to understand their states. So it would be an activity that we do for fun. And if that activity also goes into their backpack as a regulating resource, more power to it. That's great. Yeah.
All right, I think that takes care of our questions.
Okay, thank you for your questions. So this is what I just showed you, the situated cognition, where you can, make little Velcro dots and they can move along their path if they'd like. That's just another option for you. And distributed cognition. So the way I would do this with a group of students is, like if we're trying to learn our AT words, I would, in distributed, we're going to share the wealth. We're going to help each other learn. So I'd split the group in half. And we're also working on midline. We're working on ATNR. We're working on all kinds of good stuff, tracking and targeting, and a lot's going on with this one very simple activity. So as a reading specialist, I know that many of my students have midline and postural stability and all these different issues. And I know that unless I target those issues, what I'm teaching isn't going to be sticking, because the energy expenditure to sit upright, they're too busy paying attention trying to sit upright than to pay attention to my lesson. So I'm always working on all of these neurodevelopmental skills while I'm also teaching reading. So cat, then we would do this, and I always bend this arm, because if you do this, it puts strain, and I've had some shoulder issues because of doing it this way. So please bend your arm like this, and the other one goes straight. I don't know if you can see it over here, but we're doing cat. So the first group is saying cat and jumping and clapping at the same time, some nice heavy work. And then the second group goes mat and jumps, and then the third group, and then in row 2, you go group 1, group 2, and you go back and forth. And then at the end, I have them all do it together. So we've all learned cat, mat, sat, bat, cat, fat, mat, and pat. And we've had fun. We've helped organize disorganized energy for those who were in sympathetic when we started the activity. In the book, I have a lot of things where I'm having them check in, like before they even start a learning activity. Where are you? Where are you on your path? Are you okay? If you're not, what do we need to do? Do you need organizing movement? And so this is just, those who know me, this is the way I teach. And I'm so excited. I hear OTs and PTs all the time starting to use this. They're becoming part of the reading team. Jess, my trainer in New Jersey, they actually paid to send her to a reading workshop. And so she's so excited. She said they are making such progress. These stalled students who weren't going anywhere. My thing is, so many more students can read than we think they can read. Shalia, 54 IQ, nonverbal, she'll never read. I'm like, no, she's gonna read. Like I really believe that when we use these 3 forms of cognition, we use them faithfully in the environment, students can do so much better than we think they can do. You will be so surprised at how well. So with a non-speaking student, how would I do something like that with the cat or whatever? Well, of course, I wouldn't necessarily say the words, but I do things like I have a little donut with a hole in the middle, and I say, find the word cat on this page. And then they're working on vision tracking. I'm seeing which eye is dominant. It's very fascinating. And then, well, let's look at hat, find hat for me. I do things like that all the time, where even if they're non-speaking, I look to see, can they find these words for me, even if they can't say them. So this is what we would call socially shared activity, right? We're with a group and we're working, and it's also distributed cognition. All right. And then we're up to step, actually, this should say step 7, engage the divided brain. Now, there's so much, oh my goodness, so much about this right brain, left brain. Are we right-brained? Are we left-brained? I'm going to take a break on this one. Okay. So there is this book called The Master and His Emissary, The Divided Brain and the Making of the Western World. It is 600 pages. It is this thick and the print's this tiny. No, I didn't read it cover to cover, but I did get the highlights of it. And it's really fascinating. Ian McGilchrist was, I think he was a psychologist, and he worked in trauma wards. He worked with people that had had strokes, and different things happened to their brain, and then he'd watch and he'd say what things go offline and what things are online. And he really tackled this whole idea of right brain versus left brain. I know some people take their kids to somebody and they'll say, oh, you're right brained or you're left brained. And the science doesn't support that. We aren't that. We're whole brained. However, each hemisphere looks at the world a little bit differently. And when we're doing our midline activities, we always think, this is a really important point. I always say, we're getting integrated, right, with midline activities. However, as much as the two hemispheres talk to each other via the corpus callosum, do you know the two hemispheres also refuse to talk to each other via the corpus callosum on purpose? Because sometimes it's too much information and the right hemisphere doesn't need to know it, or the left hemisphere doesn't need to know it. So it purposefully actually will also inhibit that information from crossing, which I found fascinating because I'm always thinking, oh, we're doing our cross to integrate. Well, yes and no, it depends on the situation. So the right hemisphere is that place of free play. That's like, just go play, kids, go out and play. Right? It's sensory movement. It sees the world as curious explorer. It's a risk taker. You know, it's wanting to, it has an open loop system at work. If you have an open loop system, you won't be very effective. Open loop systems means I send an IEP notice out, nobody gets back to me and tells me whether they're going to attend or not. That's open loop. Closed loop is there's something on that email you sent where they have to respond, yes, I'm going to be there. That's a closed loop system. So open loop for the right hemisphere is, I'm just taking it in, man. I'm just seeing what all's around. I'm going on this hike and I'm just enjoying the beauty. And it's a both and kind of place. It's a both and. The left hemisphere likes the rules, likes the checklists and the worksheets, likes safety and low risk. It's looking inside of itself to say, what do I already know about this information? Okay. It likes boundaries. It likes a closed loop. It's an either or. It's black or white. It's yes or no. It's on or off. In politics, you can see, where are we? We're left hemisphere. Everybody's kind of either or. You're either here or you're here. There's no both and. There's no that right. But the interesting thing is all information goes to the right hemisphere first. And then it goes over to the left hemisphere, and left hemisphere checks in and says, okay, yeah, I see this. I know where it relates. I know what it relates to. I've been here before. I've done this before. Yep, I'm safe. Okay, and sends it back to the right hemisphere where you can be more free to play. So there's always these checks and balances going on. So, which I find fascinating. So in writing the book, I made sure that I had activities that the left hemisphere go, yep, I feel very safe with this observation checklist. And then I have more playful activities like keeping one foot in ventral, you know, think about the people or pets that you love, think about places you love going. So I have these more exploratory kind of activities, and then I also have these very straightforward, here's your checklist or here's your form, you're gonna fill this out. And it's a way to make sure that you're feeling safe while you're going through these activities, because your hemisphere is going, yeah, you know, this feels good to me. Left hemisphere, right hemisphere is going, yep, I get it. And together they're working together to understand these concepts. So I have another book, a little supplemental book I created called the Bop, Think, Bounce. Sorry, I'm looking at my time again. My phone just keeps like going dead on me. So 5:30. Okay, we're good. Okay, Bop, Think, Bounce book, and this is so fun. I'm getting really good response, and I love teaching this. Okay, so this is part of the 3 C's, right? Choice. Do you want to bop? Do you want to bink? Or do you want to bounce? So this particular activity, you have right, left, both. So on your screen right now, you can do this. Right hand is always red, right. Left hand is always blue, and then green is both, and then yellow is pause. So on your screen right now, or you can just tap and go right, left, both. Left, pause, right. So you can just use your fingers. We have little red and blue tapping sticks we use, which are just pencils, you know, that are red and blue. And then, so bopping is you can use your fist, right, left. For both, I do one fist over the other, because unless the little fist fit on there. And then for binking, I do the tapping because I don't know. Shalene and I were playing around with it and go bink, 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 and it just made sense. So it's my own word I made up. It's called binking. And then bouncing is you have red and blue balls, right? Red ball in the right hand and blue in the left, and you bounce, right, left, both. You're working on tracking. You're working on convergence. You're working on targeting. You're working on midline skills. You're just working on all kinds of cool stuff when you're doing this. You're working on pause, vagal break, flexibility of thought, flexibility of the nervous system. Does this stress a kid out? And if it stresses somebody out, how do they respond? Are they able to get back to ventral? Are they able to just do one row and go, okay, I'm good, I got the first row? Or do they crumble under this activity because they can't do it anymore? So I have a whole book of these kinds of activities. And this one, and I made them like to go with the bunnies, the raccoons, and the turtles, because my thought was, if somebody says, I'm ready rabbit right now, maybe they'll do a ready rabbit activity. If they say the raccoon, maybe they could do a raccoon activity, or maybe they do a turtle activity if they're in the turtle mode. I don't know, I was just thinking that might work. Okay, so this is counting 1 to 10. So you would, with your left hand, you would tap on 1, and then you find the red rabbit, and you tap 2, and you say, so you're counting and tapping at the same time. And then these are in your handouts. I gave you a blank one, so you can put any numbers, words, anything you want in there. You can put a colored dot on each of those, and they can say their colors. I mean, however you want to do it. And then this is a turtle activity where, as a reading specialist, I'm going to ask the kids to make new words. So at is in the middle, and they're going to tap with their left hand or bounce the blue ball or use their left fist, and they're going to say bat, cat, bat. Get it? So they're making new words from the rhyme in the middle. Just fun, interesting ways to help those nervous systems stay in ventral or shift into ventral. The last thing when they're in a meltdown is talking to them. It's like talking is like they're just, the language isn't online. You've got to organize that movement some way. So this is an activity that they might want to do to have organized. So the whole book culminates into this circle of success, meaning I got my backpack on, and now I'm going to look at what things I'm going to put in there. So this example is I'm going to befriend my nervous system. I'm going to increase my feelings of safety. I'm going to learn how to repair my relationships. I'm going to make connection with my friends and family. I'm going to have music, walking my dog, writing my journal, my calming moves I've learned in class. I'm going to notice and share glimmers. So those are all in the backpack. So then I thought, well, wouldn't it be kind of interesting? So this is Shalia. We're working on our laminating and making our different activities. And I always know if she smiles at things and her eyes sparkle, I'm on the right track, that other kids are going to enjoy it as well. So I said, what if I could just actually make a physical backpack? So I actually put all this stuff in a backpack, balls, tapping sticks. And it's not just to sell you stuff. It's because I feel like it would be so helpful for you to have everything together. You could take it in your backpack, and you can add, like Therapro sells all kinds of great stuff. So if you have, whatever activities you bought, drive-through menus or whatever, you can put that in your backpack and start thinking in terms of what is in my backpack that helps me stay regulated and also would help my students and could ultimately help them be more resilient. So and I'm going to start teaching a course this summer because everybody's busy during the school year, and we had so much fun last summer. We did the Polyvagal book club. Oh, I really loved it. So we're going to do 7 weeks of, I'm just going to drip the content to you because everybody's too busy. I'm not going to open it all at once. We'll do like first week, we'll do our step 1, and then we'll do our step 2. We'll just kind of throughout the summer meet. You'll be on your own, but we'll have.
That came in. It sounds like you work with OTs frequently, given your language. However, some of the terms seem to be more CBT and DBT related. How are you translating this to teachers who may not have the same background?
Oh, I'm teacher talking pretty much. I don't use CBT or what's the other initials? Like, I don't even know what was the other one? Oh,
DBT.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just basically have used the polyvagal terminology because I think that's what Deb Dana asked me to do. She said, let's just all speak the same language. So it doesn't matter what you're using. It's just a language that anybody can use. And that's what I've chosen to do in the book. It's just, let's have a common language, like extended mind science, all the 3 forms of cognition. I don't know anybody who uses those in our schools. That's why I brought it in. I feel like it's really important. So yeah, thank you for the question.